I came back to consciousness the way a bad song comes back to you, without permission and with an immediate sense of dread. The first thing I noticed was the sound, a steady, polite hiss, like a room practicing breathing exercises. The second thing was the smell, if you could call it that. Clean air with a faint metallic aftertaste, as if someone had filtered out every impurity and accidentally removed comfort as well. I opened my eyes and stared at a ceiling that wasn't a ceiling. It was dark and glassy and threaded with faint lines that shifted like slow constellations rearranging themselves. For a half-second my brain tried to be helpful. Hospital. Then it caught up with itself. Not hospital. I tried to sit up. Something snugged around my left wrist and pulled with a patient firmness, not painful, not gentle either, like a seatbelt that had seen too many idiots. I looked down. A band of warm metal circled my wrist. Not cuffs, not chain, no lock, just a seamless ring etched with tiny symbols that pulsed once softly like it was checking on me. Okay, I said aloud, because saying things aloud makes them less terrifying. That's new. My voice sounded normal. The room did not. The walls were smooth and pale, but not white, more like the color of moonlight when it decides to be smug. No corners, no visible seams, no vents. Yet the air system was clearly doing its quiet hissing yoga. A low table stood beside the bed with a cup of something that shimmered faintly as if it couldn't commit to being liquid. I reached for it out of reflex. The band tightened. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me that reflexes were, apparently, negotiable. Right, I muttered. We're doing boundaries. I took inventory the way you do when you wake up somewhere you didn't plan to be. I was dressed in a plain, fitted garment, soft, dark, and suspiciously comfortable. My boots were gone. My pockets were gone. My dignity was pending review. I swung my legs over the edge anyway. The bed adjusted under me with a quiet hum, like it approved of my decision to be upright. That was worse than if it had protested. A faint click came from the ceiling. Something drifted down into view. A small orb the size of a grapefruit with 3 delicate arms folded against its body and an eye-like lens that whirred as it focused. It hovered in front of my face. I stared at it. It stared back if drones can stare. It made a sound that was half chime, half clearing its throat, then spoke in a voice that was unmistakably artificial and annoyingly calm. Subject consciousness confirmed. Congratulations. I blinked. Thank you. You are welcome. Please refrain from sudden movements, shouting, or dramatic lunging. Your medical recovery would be compromised. I rubbed my temple with my free hand, trying to convince my thoughts to stand in a neat line. Where am I? There was a tiny pause, as if the drone was deciding how much honesty my heart could handle. You are aboard a sovereign military vessel. A ship. Yes. In space. Yes. I exhaled slowly, the way you do when you're trying not to swear in front of a priest, a child, or a machine that might report you. Okay, I said again, because it was the only word my brain could afford. Who brought me here? The sovereign did. Though I stopped, because my mind had just tried to picture an alien monarch dragging me by the collar like a misbehaving pet. The sovereign, as in a king. The sovereign, the drone repeated, a fraction more emphatically, as though I'd mispronounced a brand name. I stood up. The band gave me enough slack to do it, which I did not appreciate. It meant it trusted its own control. Am I a prisoner? I asked. The drone made another small pause. Your terminology is emotionally loaded. That wasn't an answer. It was an observation. You are not in a penal holding environment. You are in a protected medical suite. Protected, I echoed. From what? The drone's lens rotated. From harm. From who? It rotated again, like it was looking for the correct drawer in a filing cabinet labeled Human Questions, and found that drawer jammed. From many. I paced the radius the band allowed, 3 steps left, 3 steps right. Just enough for me to feel like a person, not enough for me to forget I was. The door on the far wall didn't have a handle. It didn't have anything. It was just a smooth panel that looked like it could become a door if it felt like it. I walked toward it anyway. The band tightened again, still not painful but firmer. "Of course," I said to nobody. "The invisible door hates initiative." The drone's voice brightened. "Correct. The door is currently restricted. You sound pleased about that. I am programmed for helpfulness. You're programmed for smugness." "But smugness is not in my listed functions." "Then you're improvising." If it had a face, I'm sure it would have looked offended. The panel made a whispering shift. A seam appeared. The door slid open without sound. I took a step back instinctively, then stepped forward again because fear is one thing and curiosity is another, and they often wear the same shoes. Two figures stood outside, not human. They were shaped like humans, 2 arms, 2 legs, heads proportioned similarly, but taller, broader at the shoulders, with armor that looked grown rather than built. The material was matte and dark with thin lines that glowed faintly, like veins of blue fire under stone. Their helmets were open-faced and their skin was, God, it was close enough to human to be unsettling. Pale, warm-toned, real features, real eyes except their ears. Long, elegant, tapered, like a myth decided to get serious. One of them spoke and the drone chirped softly. "Do not attempt to flee," the drone translated. "You would be caught and it would be embarrassing." I stared at it. "For me or for them?" "For you," the drone said immediately. "For them it would be exercise." That should not have made me laugh, but it did. A quick, incredulous sound that escaped before I could stop it. The guard on the left tilted her head slightly, as if hearing laughter from a restrained human in a medical suite wasn't on her daily schedule. I straightened my posture purely out of spite. "I'm not trying to flee. I'm trying to understand why I'm here." The guard said nothing. The air behind them shifted, and I felt it before I saw it. The way you feel a storm arrive even if the sky is still bright. Another figure stepped into view. She was not taller than the guards, but the space seemed to move around her like it knew its role. She wore armor too, but hers carried more detail, subtle metallic filigree along the chest and shoulders, faint symbols that mirrored the ones on my wristband. Her hair was dark and smooth, pulled back in a way that made the line of her jaw unmistakable. Her face could have belonged to a human woman in another life. High cheekbones, steady mouth, eyes that held too much quiet to be casual. And the ears, longer than the guards, sharper, not monstrous beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful when it's perfectly balanced. She looked at me like she was reading something written in my bones. I wanted to speak first. I did not succeed. "I am awake," I managed, because apparently my brain had chosen the world's worst icebreaker. Her gaze didn't waver. "I know." The drone chirped again, unnecessarily cheerful. "The sovereign acknowledges your consciousness." I glanced at the drone. "That's her." "Correct." I looked back at her. "You brought me here." "Yes." "Why?" Her eyes remained on mine, not predatory, not kind, something worse, deliberate. "Because you were unclaimed," she said. I frowned. "Unclaimed like luggage." The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile. "Like prey." A cold line ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the room temperature. "So what am I now?" She stepped closer. The guards didn't move, but the corridor felt tighter, as if the ship itself leaned in to listen. "You are mine," she said simply. I swallowed. "That's not, I mean, you can't just." "I can," she replied. The symbols on my wrist pulsed once, as if agreeing with her. I forced a breath, trying to keep my voice from cracking into something pathetic. "Is this captivity?" Her head tilted a fraction, the long ear catching a thread of light. "Captivity implies I took you to harm you." "And you did." "No." "Then what is this?" She held my gaze as if it was a thing she could keep steady through sheer will. "Protection," she said. "A claim is the only shield my enemies cannot ignore." I tried to laugh again, and it came out thin. "Congratulations. I've been upgraded from abducted to political furniture." The drone chimed. "Clarification, you are not furniture. Furniture is stationary." One of the guards made a sound that might have been a cough, but it carried suspicious amusement. The Queen didn't look away. "You will be treated with respect," she said. "You will be safe." Safe, I repeated, tasting the word like it might be counterfeit. "And free." Her answer was immediate, and for the first time there was something almost like regret in it, small, controlled, but present. "Not yet," she said. "Not while your existence is a weapon in someone else's hands." My mouth went dry. "And in yours." Her eyes softened by a fraction, which was somehow more dangerous than if they'd hardened. "In mine," she said, "your existence is a promise." But I didn't know what that meant. I only knew the band on my wrist warmed, pulsing slowly like a second heartbeat, and the ship around us hummed as if it had already decided the outcome of this conversation. The Queen turned slightly toward the corridor. "Come," she said. I didn't move. "Where?" She looked back at me, long ears poised, expression calm. "To show you," she said, "what you have been claimed from." I followed because the alternative was standing in a moonlit room wearing borrowed clothes and arguing with a bracelet. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. Not temperature, pressure. The corridor outside my suite felt like it had a purpose, like everything on this ship was moving toward an outcome that had been decided before I was born. The floor under my bare feet, yes, bare, because apparently abductors have standards, was not metal. It was something that gave a little, like dense rubber, except it hummed faintly in response to my steps as if it was taking notes. The guards flanked me without touching me. The Queen walked ahead at an easy pace, neither rushing nor performing. That was almost comforting, until I realized she didn't need to perform. She could own the room without announcing it. The band on my wrist loosened as I moved, granting me a longer tether. It still existed. It just wanted me to forget it existed. "Your restraint," I said, holding up my wrist. "Can we discuss the fashion choice? Because it's giving royal kidnapping chic." The drone hovered alongside my shoulder, gliding like it had done this 1,000 times. "It is not a restraint. It is a bond marker. That's the same thing with better marketing." "But it is not the same," the drone replied. "Restraints are used on criminals. Bond markers are used on." It paused as if its vocabulary file was undergoing a moral debate. "On protected individuals," it finished. "Protected," I echoed, because the word still tasted like a trap. The Queen didn't turn back. "If you continue to interpret protection as insult, you will be exhausted," she said. "Save your energy for the things that deserve it." But I wanted to snap back, but my mouth chose honesty instead. "What deserves it?" She glanced at me then. One quick look, eyes steady, ears angled slightly back like she was listening with more than sound. "Those who would have killed you before you woke." The corridor widened into a gallery that looked like a cross between a cathedral and a weapon. Tall arches rose overhead, not decorative but structural, ribs of the ship. Thin lines of light ran along them in slow pulses, as if the vessel had a circulatory system. To my left, a window, no frame, no glass seam, opened onto space. Not a screen, not a projection, space. Stars scattered like spilled salt across a blackness, so deep my brain tried to reject it as a concept. A distant nebula smoldered purple and gold, and something massive, another ship, maybe a carrier, glided past far enough away to be silent, close enough to make my stomach remember gravity existed. I stopped without meaning to. The guard stopped with me. The Queen kept walking for 3 steps before she realized I was stuck in awe like a tourist who'd seen his first waterfall. She turned back. "You have never been off your world." "No," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "And I feel like someone should have asked." The drone chirped. "Noted, future abductions will include a survey." I shot it a look. That was sarcasm. The drone's lens rotated. Sarcasm detected, logging for cultural enrichment. The Queen's mouth did that almost smile again, brief and dangerous. "Come," she said, softer this time. "You asked where you are. Now you will understand why leaving you unclaimed was not an option." We moved again. Doors opened without being touched. Sometimes they didn't open until the Queen passed them, as if they recognized authority the way animals recognize a handler. The ship's interior was full of quiet motion, small maintenance drones slipping along ceiling tracks, panels adjusting their angles, lights shifting to follow us like a respectful audience. We reached an observation chamber with a circular platform at its center. The walls were lined with thin, vertical slits that glowed faintly. The Queen stepped onto the platform. I hesitated. The band warmed, a subtle pulse. "Don't," I told it. I'm walking. It did nothing, which was somehow ruder. The Queen extended a hand, not grabbing, just offering. Her fingers were long and steady, and up close I noticed faint iridescent strands along her temple, like living circuitry beneath skin. Human adjacent, but not human. The long ears were even more striking from this distance, elegant in a way that made my mind keep reaching for myths. I took her hand because I didn't have a better plan. Her skin was warmer than mine. The platform hummed. A field rose around us, not visible but present like pressure against my cheeks. The air tasted charged, clean, and sharp, and then the room unfolded. The slits along the wall expanded into luminous shapes. Holograms. No, more than holograms. Three-dimensional projections with weight and depth, as if the ship was pulling data from space and letting it bloom in the air. A corridor appeared in light. Lines, nodes, flickering sigils that shifted in patterns too complex for my eyes to track. Routes, borders, threat zones, names I couldn't pronounce. The drone floated higher, sounding proud. Tactical Star Lattice engaged. Star Lattice, I repeated. That's unnecessarily poetic for a warship. It is efficient, the drone said. Poetry increases retention by 12%. I looked at the Queen. Your ship has opinions. My ship has survived, she said. Survival breeds personality. A cluster of symbols flared near the outer edge of the projection. They burned a deep, warning red. The drone's voice changed, still calm but sharper. Predatory claims registered in the last cycle, it said. 3 houses, 2 mercantile factions, 1 privateer guild. I leaned closer to the projection, and as I did, a small marker appeared. An icon shaped like a simple human silhouette, bright white against the dark. It followed my movement like it was tethered to me. I froze. That's me. Yes, the Queen said. The white silhouette pulsed once. Then thin lines extended from it like hooks toward the red clusters. My throat tightened. They're tracking me. They are hunting you, the Queen corrected, and her voice didn't rise, but the room felt colder anyway. You were found in contested drift. That makes you a prize, a message, a bargaining chip, a proof of weakness, depending on who speaks your name. I swallowed hard. Why would anyone care about me? The Queen's eyes stayed on the projection, not on me. Because you exist in a place you should not exist. Because some will say you were taken from my territory and that my borders are soft. Because others will say you were rescued by me and that I am sentimental. Her gaze finally lifted to mine. And because the quickest way to wound a ruler is to place a living problem in her hands. I forced out a breath. So I'm the living problem. You are the living proof, she said. There is a difference. The drone chimed, unhelpfully upbeat. Also, your species is rare here. Rarity increases market value. I stared at it. There's a market. The drone hesitated. There is always a market. I looked at the Queen again. So you claimed me to keep them off me. Yes. And you did it publicly. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed her ears shift slightly forward, attentive. A quiet claim invites challenge. A sovereign claim silences most. Most, I repeated, and the ones it doesn't silence. Her fingers tightened around mine just a fraction, not possessive, anchoring. Those are the ones you will not face alone, she said. I tried to process that, tried to accept it as comfort, but it landed like a heavier kind of fear. You keep saying claim like it's a legal document. What is it exactly? Some kind of ritual. It is law, she said, and technology and threat. The band on my wrist pulsed, as if it heard its name. The bond marker broadcasts a status recognized by every major fleet and station in this sector. the drone explained. It informs hostile parties that any harm to you constitutes an assault on the sovereign herself. I lifted my wrist again, staring at the warm metal. So I'm basically wearing your flag. Yes, the Queen said. That's not comforting. It is not meant to be comforting, she replied. It is meant to be effective. I turned, looking through the window at the dark beyond the ship. It felt suddenly less like scenery and more like an ocean full of teeth. My voice came out quieter. If I didn't have this, what would happen? The Queen didn't answer immediately. That pause told me more than words could. Then she spoke, low and precise. Someone would take you. Someone would sell you. Someone would make you confess things you do not know. And when you ceased to be useful, they would discard you. She met my eyes again, and there was something in her gaze that wasn't softness but still wasn't cruelty. You would not have woken twice. I let out a humorless laugh, because if I didn't laugh, I might do something worse. So my options were dead or yours. The drone chimed again. Statistically, yours increases survival. I glared at it. Nobody asked you. I am here to assist, it said serenely. I looked back at the Queen. And what do you get out of this? Don't tell me it's charity. You don't seem like the charity type. For the first time, something flickered across her face, an emotion so quick it almost didn't exist. Weariness, or maybe something like restraint. I get stability, she said. A closed variable, a problem held within a boundary I control. And if I refuse? Her gaze didn't harden. It simply became very, very clear. You can refuse my intent, she said. You cannot refuse the reality outside this ship. I stared at the white silhouette in the projection. My projection, a tiny bright thing surrounded by red. Then, because my brain is committed to surviving through bad jokes, I muttered, fantastic. I'm a diplomatic landmine with legs. The Queen's almost smile returned, faint as a star seen through smoke. Then learn where you step, she said. The projection dimmed, folding back into the walls like a creature returning to sleep. The field around us lowered with a soft hum. The Queen released my hand, and for a moment my fingers felt colder without her warmth. She turned toward the corridor again. You wanted to know what you were claimed from, she said. Now you have seen the first layer. I swallowed, forcing myself to move. You said first layer. I'm going to regret asking what the second is, aren't I? The drone floated close and chirped, almost gleeful. Yes. The Queen walked on, and the ship's quiet lights followed her like they'd been trained to worship. They didn't take me straight to a dungeon, which was either a sign of progress or a sign they'd invented a nicer dungeon. We walked through corridors that seemed to anticipate foot traffic like they were mildly psychic. When I drifted too close to a door, the band on my wrist warmed, not tightening, just reminding, like a polite hand on the shoulder from someone who didn't have to be polite. Does it ever stop doing that? I asked the drone. It stops when you stop considering poor decisions, the drone replied. So never, I said. The drone hovered in silence, which I took as agreement. The Queen led us into a section of the ship that felt less ceremonial and more alive. More people, more motion, more of that contained violence you can smell even when everything is clean. The guards who passed us weren't all identical. Some wore heavier armor, some carried weapons that looked like folded light, and all of them had the same long-eared silhouette that made my brain keep trying to assign them a fantasy category. Except their eyes were too steady for fantasy. A few glanced at me, and the glances weren't curious. They were calculating. I leaned toward the Queen, lowering my voice as if whispers mattered on a warship. Quick question. Am I the only human you've ever had on board, or do you run a secret zoo? She didn't look at me, but her ears angled a fraction, listening. You are the only one. That doesn't make me feel better. It should, she said. A zoo would imply intent. What do I imply? She finally turned her head slightly. A complication. I snorted. I've been called worse. You will be called worse, she said, and somehow it sounded like advice. We reached a set of doors that opened onto a cavernous chamber. The air was cooler here, brisk with ionized tang. The floor was marked with geometric patterns that looked decorative until I realized they were impact zones. Along the walls, racks held equipment, armor segments that shifted as if adjusting to an invisible wearer, rifles that had no barrels so much as apertures, and compact drones resting in cradles like sleeping insects. A training bay. My wristband warmed again, as if it wanted to clap for the thematic consistency. At the center of the chamber, a dozen soldiers moved in controlled drills. Their choreography was precise enough to be art, brutal enough to be honest. Blades flashed, real metal and something that was probably not metal. A pair sparred with staffs that hummed with a magnetic field, each strike leaving a faint ripple in the air. They all stopped when the Queen stepped in, not because she signaled, not because a siren sounded, just stopped, like gravity shifted. The silence was thick enough to chew, then a voice cut through it, smooth and warm as a knife handle. "My sovereign," it said. A figure approached from the far side, male I thought at first, until the face registered as too finely structured to match my instincts. The armor was less heavy than the others, more ceremonial, and his hair was silver black, braided back from a face that smiled without inviting anyone in. His long ears were slightly shorter than the Queen's, but they were adorned with thin rings that caught the overhead light. He bowed with perfect timing, then straightened and looked at me as if I were a rumor made flesh. "And this," he said, "must be the human." I waited for the drone to translate something, but apparently the man had spoken in my language, perfectly. That did not improve my mood. I pointed at him. "You're cheating." His smile broadened. "I am prepared." The Queen's gaze stayed level. "Commander Vale." So that was his name. Vale. It sounded like the kind of name you whispered right before bad decisions. He turned slightly, keeping his posture respectful while his eyes did something disrespectful, measuring. "Your ship has been lively," he said. "Rumors breed quickly in confined steel." "Confined steel," I muttered. "That's a poetic way to say space murder hallway." The commander's eyes flicked to me, amused. "He speaks." "I speak," I confirmed. "Often it's a flaw." The Queen didn't react to my comment, but the faintest shift in her mouth suggested she was either entertained or considering having me sedated. It was hard to tell with royalty. Commander Vale stepped closer, not too close, but close enough that I could see the faint shimmer along his temples, the same iridescent filaments the Queen had. Their species, then, or at least their bloodline. "You woke believing yourself captive," he said. "I did," I replied. "And then I was informed I'm not captive, I'm jurisdiction." I glanced at the drone, or furniture, I forget. The drone chimed, "Not furniture." Vale laughed softly, the sound like someone pretending laughter was harmless. "And now you believe." "I believe I'm on an alien warship," I said. "I believe I'm wearing a bracelet that functions as a legal threat. And I believe I'm currently a conversation piece with legs." One of the soldiers behind Vale shifted, as if that was funny but they weren't allowed to enjoy humor. Another looked offended on behalf of the ship. Vale's gaze slid to the Queen. "You claimed him personally." "Yes," she said. "Directly," he pressed, still polite, still smiling. "Yes." "Without delegation." "Yes." I watched him. His questions weren't for me. They were for everyone listening. Every soldier in the bay had gone still, but their attention was sharp, hungry. Vale's smile remained. "That is unusual." The Queen's voice didn't change. "Unusual does not mean improper." "Of course not." Vale inclined his head. "It merely invites interpretation." I raised a hand. "Can I interpret something too? Because my interpretation is that you're trying to say scandal without saying scandal." A few soldiers made a sound that might have been a suppressed cough. The tension cracked barely. Vale's eyes returned to me, pleased. "Excellent, he is not docile." "I'm docile," I said. "I'm just not quiet." The Queen's eyes shifted briefly to my wristband, then back to Vale. "If you have questions, ask them directly." Vale's smile sharpened. "Very well." He looked at me as if the answer belonged to him already. "Human, what did you offer my sovereign?" I blinked. Offer her. What am I, a merchant? I don't have pockets. What did you promise her? He continued, voice smooth. That warranted a sovereign claim. I promised her a lifetime supply of bad jokes, I said. She seemed desperate. The drone chimed, unhelpfully eager. Humor is not a documented currency in this sector. Give it time, I muttered. Vale's gaze didn't waver. Do you understand what a claim means here? I understand it means I'm expensive and inconvenient, I said, and that people in red hologram clusters want to turn me into a cautionary tale. His smile faltered for a fraction, then returned. You have seen the lattice. I have seen the "you're about to be eaten" diagram, yes. A soldier behind him made a small noise, definitely a laugh this time. It earned them a hard look from someone else. Vale stepped a half pace closer. It wasn't aggressive. It was intimate in the way a threat can be intimate. Then you should understand, he said quietly, that your existence aboard this ship is more than a medical decision. It is a political statement. I swallowed. The room was listening so hard I could almost hear it. The Queen's voice cut in, calm and final. The statement is mine to make. Vale bowed again, but it looked like a performance now. Naturally. The Queen moved, and the bay seemed to exhale. She walked toward a console near the training floor, and the lights along the ceiling shifted, focusing. The soldiers snapped back into formation with the ease of people trained to obey without thinking about it. She didn't look at me when she spoke next. You will learn where you are. You will learn what is expected, and you will learn how to remain alive long enough to choose what you want. I frowned. I'd like to choose not being hunted as a starter. The drone chimed. Excellent choice. Availability limited. I shot it a look. Please stop being honest like that. Vale, still nearby, smiled as if he'd just watched a piece move on a board. Training, he said, almost conversational. A human learning on an Imperial warship. That will make excellent gossip. Tell your gossip I'm charming, I said. I will, he replied, though charm is rarely what keeps something alive out here. The Queen finally turned to face me. Her eyes held no softness, but there was a controlled steadiness there that felt like a hand offered in darkness. Step onto the floor, she said. I looked at the impact zone markings, then at the soldiers, then back at her. Is this where I find out if your protection includes health insurance? The faintest flicker crossed her mouth again. Almost a smile, almost not. Your humor is poorly timed. It's the only timing I have, I said and stepped forward. The band on my wrist warmed, not tightening this time, guiding. As my foot crossed onto the marked floor, a thin, invisible field brushed over my skin like static. The drone chirped. Combat safety barrier engaged. Probability of fatality reduced. I paused. Reduced to what? The drone's lens rotated. Acceptable. I stared at it. We have different definitions of that word. Behind me, Commander Vale's laughter was soft and private. In front of me, the Queen's gaze stayed fixed, steady as a star that had decided it would not move for anyone. And I realized with a sharp little twist in my stomach that this wasn't a lesson in fighting. It was a lesson in belonging, whether I wanted the membership or not. The first time I tried to copy their stance, my body filed a formal complaint. Your knees are wrong, the drone informed me, hovering at shoulder height like an overqualified mosquito. My knees have been wrong since Earth, I said through clenched teeth. Across the marked floor, two of the Queen's soldiers moved in mirrored precision, their staffs humming with a magnetic field that made the air prickle. The Queen watched without blinking, arms behind her back, posture relaxed in the way only lethal people can afford. Commander Vale stood off to the side with the pleasant expression of someone attending theater. I took a breath and tried again. The wristband warmed, guiding my hand a fraction to the left, rotating my forearm like it knew where my bones were supposed to go. That is unsettling, I muttered. It is helpful, the drone said. It's invasive helpfulness. Your species is famous for invasive helpfulness, the drone replied. You used it to put flags on moons. I opened my mouth to argue and found myself losing. In the background, Vale made a quiet sound that might have been laughter or a predator clearing his throat. The Queen finally spoke. Again. I raised my hands in what I hoped was a defensive posture, and what was, realistically, me asking the universe for mercy. The nearest soldier stepped forward to demonstrate the movement, smooth, controlled, the staff arcing toward my shoulder. The safety field brushed my skin like static, then thickened between us. The staff struck the invisible barrier with a dull thump, stopping short of my collarbone. The drone chimed. Impact reduced. Bruising probability, moderate. Moderate is still a lot of bruising, I said. Your bones are dense, the drone replied. This is advantageous. That's the nicest thing anyone said about me all day. The soldier withdrew, patient. The Queen's gaze remained steady, but her long ears angled slightly forward, attention sharpened. Again, she repeated. I moved awkward, late, but moving. The band warmed, nudged my wrist into alignment. My arm met the staff where the barrier allowed contact without harm. It felt like pushing against thick water. Something in the floor hummed under my feet, a deeper vibration that didn't belong to training. I paused instinctively. The Queen's eyes narrowed, not at me, past me. The lights in the bay shifted, not dimming but changing frequency. The soft white took on a thin, red edge. A voice came from nowhere and everywhere, calm enough to be insulting. Alert. Internal integrity variance detected. The drone's lens rotated, suddenly alert. That is not training protocol. No kidding, I said. The floor's hum deepened. For a heartbeat, my stomach floated, gravity dipping like an elevator deciding to prank everyone at once. A few soldiers adjusted with effortless micro-movements. I nearly bit my tongue off. The Queen didn't move. She simply said, quiet and absolute, lockdown. The bay doors slid shut with a soundless finality. Panels along the walls lit in thin lines of amber. The safety field around me flickered, then reasserted itself. Commander Vale's pleasant smile vanished. That is inconvenient, he said, which was the most polite way I'd ever heard someone say we might all die. The ship spoke again. Secondary alert, unauthorized access, Deck 12. Life support routing interference. My throat tightened. Deck 12 is. The drone chimed, unhelpfully educational, adjacent to medical suites. I stared at the Queen. That's my nicer dungeon. Her gaze was already elsewhere, mind moving faster than speech. They are not trying to kill you in your bed, she said. They are trying to make my claim look like negligence. So this is politics, I said. This is assassination wearing politics, she corrected. Another vibration shuddered through the floor. A far-off thud rolled through the ship's bones. The training bay's holographic panels blinked, then showed a schematic of the deck corridors, sealed sections, flashing markers. One marker pulsed in white, me, again. The red markers clustered like hungry fish. I backed up a step, then stopped when the band warmed, guiding, not restraining. It was almost worse. It wasn't holding me. It was asking me to stay alive. The Queen turned to the soldiers. Form on me, Vale. I am already offended, Vale said, drawing a compact weapon from his belt. It unfolded into a crescent of light edged with something dark, like the absence of photons. Whoever planned this has poor taste. I lifted my hands. I just want to be clear. If we survive, I'd like to file a complaint about the customer experience. The drone chirped. Noted, your feedback is valuable. We moved as a unit. The doors that had sealed now opened at the Queen's approach, the ship recognizing her authority even under threat. The corridor outside was bathed in amber, the walls pulsing with thin warning lines like the vessel was showing stress. As we ran, I noticed something I hadn't earlier. The ship wasn't just metal. It was layered, adaptive. Panels shifted to create barriers. Drones zipped along ceiling tracks like silver insects. The air itself changed density in short waves, pressure fields bracing structural points. Your ship is alive, I panted. It is loyal, the Queen said without slowing. Do not confuse them. We turned a corner and met the first sign of sabotage. A door that should have opened stayed shut. It seemed glowing an angry red. A maintenance panel beside it was torn open. Wires, not wires, filaments, exposed and sparking with cold blue light. A soldier stepped forward, weapon raised. "Wait," I blurted before my brain could veto it. "That's not a door lock, that's a field coupler." Everyone looked at me. I felt my face heat. I used to work security systems. Not alien ones, but physics is still physics. The drone hovered closer. He is improvising. "I'm surviving," I corrected, the Queen's gaze fixed on me. "Can you open it?" "I can try," I said, immediately regretting volunteering. I crouched by the panel. The filaments buzzed against my fingertips like angry hair. The band warmed, and for a second I thought it was going to tighten, stop me from being an idiot. Instead, it pulsed in a pattern, faint and rhythmic, like it was offering a map. "That is deeply unsettling," I whispered and followed the pulse. The panel responded as if it recognized the bond marker's authority. The spark steadied. The door's red glow flickered, then shifted to amber. The seam parted. Behind us, Vale let out a low sound. "Interesting." "I don't like that tone," I muttered. We pushed through the door into a narrower corridor, and the air hit us like a wall, thin, sharp, already losing oxygen. At the far end, two figures in dark armor worked at another open panel, hands moving fast. They weren't guards. Their movements were messy, desperate. One turned, saw the Queen, and froze. The other reached for something at their belt. The Queen's soldiers moved like a single thought. A beam of blue-white light snapped out, not hitting the saboteur but pinning their hand to the wall with a gravity spike. The saboteur yelped, dropping their device. It clattered, then unfolded into a spider-like drone that tried to scuttle away. My drone, my ever-present commentator, chirped delightedly. "Unauthorized device. Disrespectful." One of the Queen's soldiers stomped it flat. It died with a whine that sounded almost offended. The pinned saboteur hissed something in a language the translator didn't bother rendering, probably because it was mostly threats. The Queen stepped forward, calm as vacuum. Her long ears angled back, and for the first time I understood that her restraint wasn't softness. It was control. "You chose the wrong corridor," she said. The saboteur spat. "He shouldn't exist under your seal." The Queen's eyes cut to me, then back. "He exists," she replied, "and you will explain who sent you." The other saboteur, still free, lunged toward the panel, fingers flying as if trying to finish the sabotage before dying. The corridor lights flickered. My chest tightened, and for a terrifying second, my lungs felt like they were sipping air through a straw. I didn't think. I grabbed the fallen device they'd dropped earlier, some kind of field tuner, and slammed it against the open panel the way you'd smack an old radio. It sparked violently. The corridor lurched, gravity hiccuping. The saboteur screamed, thrown sideways into the wall. The panel snapped shut with a hard seal, as if the ship itself had finally had enough. The air stabilized. My lungs filled again. I stared at my hands, shaking. I think I fixed it." The drone chimed. He performed an untrained intervention. Probability of success was low. Outcome, irritatingly positive. One of the soldiers looked at me like I'd grown an extra head. Vale looked at me like I'd become a chess piece he hadn't accounted for. The Queen stepped close, too close. Her gaze swept over me, quick and thorough, checking for injury. When she spoke, her voice was low enough that only I could hear it. "I claimed you to keep you alive," she said. "Do not make me defend you from your own courage." My mouth opened, and what came out was the worst possible joke at the worst possible time. "In my defense, I'm also defending you from your enemy's terrible wiring." For a heartbeat, her expression held stone. Then, impossibly, the corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile, a crack in the armor. "Continue breathing," she said, and turned back to the saboteurs. As the soldiers dragged the pinned one away, the ship's voice returned, calm again, as if it hadn't just tried to suffocate us. Integrity variance contained. New alert, multiple unauthorized presences. Deck 12, expanding. My stomach sank. "That wasn't the whole team," I said. The The Queen's long ears angled forward again, listening to a danger only she could hear. "No," she replied. And as the corridor lights pulsed amber like a warning heartbeat, I realized the second layer she'd promised me wasn't a map or a lecture. It was a demonstration of how quickly protection becomes war. We didn't run toward the danger like heroes. We ran toward it like people who had just learned the ship could decide to stop giving them oxygen. The corridor narrowed again, then widened into a junction where 3 passageways split like a trident. The walls pulsed amber, and thin glyphs scrolled along the seams. Ship language, warning language. The kind of language designed to make you feel small while you were still technically alive. The drone hovered close to my shoulder, lens spinning as it parsed the air. Multiple presences confirmed, unauthorized, probability of ambush high. "Do you ever say anything soothing?" I asked, breath still not fully under my control. "I can play calming audio," it offered. "If it's whale sounds, I swear." "It is a curated selection of imperial funeral hymns," the drone said. I blinked. "That's worse." "Statistically, it encourages compliance," it replied. Vale glanced back, expression sharp. "Your attendant is unpleasant." "It's not my attendant," I said. "It's more like a judgmental cloud." The Queen lifted a hand, and the entire unit slowed. Soldiers fanned out without a word, taking angles that made the corridor feel smaller. She listened. Not with her ears alone, I realized. The long points angled forward, then back, like antennae tasting pressure changes. The drone's voice dropped half an octave, suddenly professional. "Deck 12 junction ahead. Hostile signal interference. They are masking." Vale's weapon, still that crescent of light edged with darkness, tilted in his hand. "Masking on a warship is bold." The Queen's gaze didn't leave the corridor ahead. "It is desperation," she said. "Bold is what predators do when they believe the prey is already boxed." I swallowed. "Are we boxed?" She looked at me briefly. "Not while I am breathing." That was reassuring, in the way a cliff is reassuring because it's very confident about gravity. We reached the junction. A door panel hung open like a torn wound. Inside, a maintenance chamber hummed with unfamiliar energy, thin waves that made my teeth feel itchy. Someone had installed a device the size of a suitcase against the wall, its surface crawling with shifting symbols. It looked less like a bomb and more like a legal argument made physical. One of the soldiers started forward. The Queen held them back with a single finger. "Watch," she said. The device pulsed once. The wristband on my arm responded immediately, warming, tightening a fraction, then pulsing as if trying to speak in a language my nerves understood. I sucked in a breath. "That thing is reacting to me." Vale's eyes narrowed. "It's keyed to the claim." The Queen stepped closer to the device without fear. "It is not meant to kill him," she said quietly. "It is meant to distort the bond marker's broadcast." My mouth went dry. "So, they want to make it look like your claim failed." "They want to make it look like I claimed you improperly," she corrected. "As if the marker is counterfeit, as if I am careless with law." Vale's smile returned, thin and unpleasant. "And if the sector believes her seal can be imitated, her throne becomes negotiable." I stared at the device. "So I'm not just a complication, I'm a test case." The drone chimed. "You are also a target." "Thank you," I muttered. "I forgot." The Queen didn't touch the device. She didn't need to. She looked at one of her soldiers and gave a small nod. The soldier moved with precision, pulling out a compact tool that unfolded into a lattice of bright lines. They pressed it near the device, and for a moment the air rippled. The suitcase-like object spasmed, then went still, its symbols freezing as if someone had paused a video. The ship's voice spoke softly overhead. Interference dampened. Residual anomalies persist. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Okay, good, great, so we." A sound came from the corridor behind us. Not footsteps, a soft scrape. The kind of sound a person makes when they've waited long enough and now they're bored of patience. The Queen's soldiers snapped around. A figure stood in the shadows at the far end of the passage, armor dark and plain. No insignia. No ceremonial lines. Their helmet was open, revealing pale skin and long ears like the others, but their eyes were wrong in a way I couldn't name. Too bright, too intent. They smiled. "My sovereign," they said, and their tone was respectful in the way poison can be respectful. Vale's weapon lifted. "You are far from your assigned posts." The figure's smile widened. "Posts are for loyal creatures." My wristband warmed again, angry this time, as if recognizing something it didn't like. The Queen spoke once, voice calm. "Identify yourself." The figure tilted their head. "I am the consequence of your weakness." That should have sounded melodramatic. It didn't. It sounded rehearsed. The drone hovered closer to me, suddenly tense. "Signal signature altered, not a standard soldier." "Meaning?" I whispered. "Meaning," the drone said, "that they have been modified." The figure took a step forward, slow. Their hands were empty, but the air around them seemed heavier, like the ship's fields didn't know how to categorize them. A faint shimmer ran along their forearms, embedded tech, living under skin. The Queen's soldiers held formation, weapons tracking. The modified figure looked straight at me. "Human," they said, as if tasting the word. "Do you know what you are?" "I'm a very tired person who would like to go home," I said, and my voice cracked into humor because if it didn't I might start screaming. The figure laughed softly. "Home, charming, no," their gaze flicked to my wristband. "You are a seal, a proof, a lever." The Queen's voice sharpened just enough to make the corridor feel colder. "You will not touch him." The figure's smile turned almost pitying. "I don't need to touch him. I need to touch what he represents." They raised a hand, palm outward. The air between us rippled. The wristband tightened hard enough to sting. Heat surged up my arm, and for a second it felt like my bones were humming. My vision blurred at the edges. I hissed through my teeth. Okay, bracelet, I get it, we're stressed." The drone's voice snapped. "Bond destabilization attempt." The Queen moved. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just fast in a way my eyes couldn't track until she was already between me and the figure, one hand lifted. Her palm met the ripple in the air, and something invisible struck her like a wave. She didn't step back. Her long ears angled back, and her eyes steady, burning, locked onto the figure with a kind of controlled fury that made my stomach drop. "You are breaking imperial law," she said. The figure's hand trembled slightly, as if pushing against a force that pushed back. "Law," they breathed. "Law is a story the powerful tell until someone rewrites it." Vale advanced a half step, weapon ready. "Enough." The Queen didn't look away from the figure. "This is not enough," she said, quiet as a blade being drawn. "This is the beginning." She lowered her hand and turned her head slightly toward me, without fully breaking her stance. "Listen carefully," she said, and her voice was low enough that it felt private inside the chaos. "The bond marker can be rewritten." I blinked, pain still buzzing in my arm. "Rewritten like removed." "Not removed," she said, "refined. Bound by rules even I cannot break." Vale's eyes flicked to her sharp. "My sovereign." "Silence," she said, still calm. The modified figure's smile faltered just a fraction. "You would weaken yourself." "I would strengthen the claim," the Queen replied, "by making it undeniable." The figure's hand pushed again. The ripple in the air deepened. The wristband burned like a brand. I clenched my jaw and forced out, "If you're rewriting it, do I get to negotiate? Because I'd like fewer near-suffocation events in the contract." The drone chimed, absurdly earnest. "User requests reduce suffocation. Noted." One of the Queen's soldiers made a sound. Half laugh, half disbelief, without taking their aim off the figure. The Queen's mouth twitched once, almost smiled, then vanished. "Yes," she said to me, steady. "You will negotiate, that is the point." The modified figure's eyes narrowed. "He does not belong in your law." The Queen's gaze hardened into something absolute. "Then my law will expand." For a heartbeat, the corridor was silent except for the hum of the ship and the shallow, stubborn sound of my breathing. The modified figure's hand lowered slightly as if reassessing. Then the ship spoke again, cool and clinical. "New alert. Multiple unauthorized breaches approaching command nexus." Time to impact, 3 minutes. Vale swore in his own language, fast, sharp. The Queen didn't flinch. She looked at the modified figure like a judge considering a sentence, then glanced at me once more. "Stay behind me," she said. I tried to grin through the burn in my arm. "I'd love to. My resume does not include dying for alien politics." Her eyes held mine for a brief moment, warmth buried under steel. "You will not die for my politics," she said. Then she turned back toward the corridor ahead, and the ship's amber light pulsed like a warning heartbeat as we moved, toward the command nexus, toward the next trap, and toward whatever rewriting a sovereign claim would cost. The command nexus was less a room and more a spine, curved walls threaded with living light, consoles grown into the structure like organs, and a central dais where the ship's tactical star lattice hung in the air like a captive galaxy. I noticed this because if I didn't notice scenery, I'd notice the part where we had 3 minutes before impact, which sounded suspiciously like the ship's polite way of saying catastrophic disappointment. We arrived to the sound of a firefight that wasn't loud so much as precise. Blue-white pulses snapped across the chamber, hitting the floor and blooming into gravity ripples. 2 of the Queen's soldiers were pinned behind a console rib. 3 more held a line near the dais. The modified figure stood nearer the center, one hand raised, bending the air in front of them into a shimmering sheet that swallowed shots like water. The ship spoke over it all in a voice so calm it made me want to throw something at a speaker I couldn't find. Command Nexus breach confirmed. Unauthorized influence attempt. Bond marker spoof. Advisory. Sovereign seal integrity at risk. "Of course it is," I muttered, because apparently I was now the kind of person who had a casual relationship with treason. The Queen stepped forward as if bullets were a mild inconvenience. Vale flanked her, weapon angled, eyes cold. The drone hovered near my shoulder, practically vibrating with the joy of crisis. "Calming audio available," it offered. "I swear if you play hymns." "Understood." "Playing silence," it replied, then went quiet in a way that felt smug. The modified figure turned toward us slowly, smile reassembling itself. "My sovereign arrives to defend her property." I felt my wristband warm, tightening just enough to remind me who everyone thought I was. The Queen's voice cut through the room like a clean blade. "He is not property." The figure's eyes flicked to me. "Then why does your seal cling to him like a collar?" I opened my mouth and heard myself speak before fear could edit it. "Because your sector has a weird obsession with paperwork." One of the soldiers, somewhere behind a console, made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough to hide a laugh. The modified figure's smile twitched. Vale glanced at me as if deciding whether I was useful or just loud. "This is not the time." "It never is," I said, and my heart hammered like it wanted to escape my ribs and file for asylum. The Queen lifted her hand and the ship responded, lights shifting, fields adjusting, the star lattice tightening into a more focused map. Lines flashed from my white silhouette to the interference node in the command nexus, as if the ship was pointing at the wound. "The device on Deck 12 was a primer," the Queen said. "This is the blade." The modified figure's hand flexed. The shimmering sheet in the air thickened and my wristband burned again, a hot line up my arm that made my vision blur. I sucked in a breath and forced it out through my teeth. "Okay, so that's still terrible." The drone snapped out of silence. "Bond destabilization increasing. Recommendation: remove user from vicinity." "Great recommendation," I wheezed. "Do you have legs?" The Queen didn't look back. "Stay with me," she said, and the words were not a command so much as an anchor thrown into a storm. Vale moved ahead, angling toward a side console. "If they are spoofing your seal, they need the relay node. Sever it." The modified figure laughed softly. "Severing is violent. My sovereign prefers law." "Law is violent," the Queen replied. "It is simply polite about it." She stepped onto the dais. The star lattice lowered, lines of light threading around her hand as if she was gripping the ship's nerve endings. I saw in a quick flash what her claim was. Not romance, not whim, but a coded sovereignty. An algorithm of power recognized by every station and fleet that mattered. And I saw, too, the risk. If they broke that seal, they didn't just expose me. They broke her. The modified figure raised both hands now. The air screamed without sound. My wristband tightened hard enough to pinch skin. Heat surged, and the bond marker pulsed in a pattern that felt like panic. My knees bent. Not from pain alone, also from something else. A pressure in the bones, as if the claim was trying to pull me toward the Queen like a magnetic field. The Queen's head turned slightly, eyes locking onto mine. "You asked to negotiate," she said. I blinked through the blur. "This seems like an aggressive time for paperwork." "But it is the only time it will be believed," she said, and her voice went lower, private inside chaos. "If we rewrite now, the ship will broadcast the new seal as it survives an attack. No one will call it counterfeit." Vale's gaze snapped to her. "My sovereign." "Silence," she said again, and this time it carried the weight of a throne. She extended her hand toward me, not grabbing, offering. My wristband burned like a brand. The modified figure's eyes widened, not with fear but with calculation. "You would bind yourself to his consent," they hissed. "You would chain your authority to a human's whim." The Queen's gaze didn't leave me. "To his choice," she corrected. I stared at her hand and realized something that would have been funny on any other day. My entire survival had turned into a contract negotiation conducted during a firefight. I laughed once, breathless, then winced because laughing hurt. If I say yes, do I get benefits, like oxygen guarantees, maybe a return-to-Earth clause, dental? The drone chimed. "Dental coverage not available." "Of course it is." The Queen's mouth twitched, almost smiled, then steel again. "You get boundaries," she said. "You get terms I cannot break. You get the right to revoke my access if I violate them." The room shook with another invisible impact. A console spat sparks. Soldiers shouted in a language I couldn't parse. The modified figure pushed harder. The shimmer in the air surged and my wristband screamed heat. I felt something in me, fear, rage, stubbornness, pull itself upright. I had woken up thinking I was captive. I had spent days trying to be small enough not to be eaten by alien politics. And somewhere along the way, I'd learned that being small didn't stop teeth. It just made swallowing easier. I grabbed the Queen's hand. The bond marker flared, and instead of pain, there was clarity, like a lock clicking into a shape it had always wanted. Light spilled from my wrist into her palm, then up her arm in fine lines. The star lattice reacted instantly, threads of code weaving between us like living script. The ship's voice changed, still calm but now intent. Sovereign seal revision initiated. Dual authentication detected. Consent node confirmed. Vale swore again, but this time it sounded like reluctant admiration. The modified figure recoiled, not physically, but in the expression, smile cracking. "You've made it mutual," they breathed. "You've made it defensible." The Queen's voice was quiet, absolute. "I have made it undeniable." The shimmering sheet collapsed like a curtain cut. The pressure on my bones vanished. I sucked in air and realized I'd been half holding my breath for an hour of my life. The soldiers moved. In 3 precise motions, they pinned the modified figure to the floor with gravity spikes that pressed them down without breaking bones. Their struggle turned into helpless trembling. The ship spoke again, almost satisfied. Unauthorized influence attempt neutralized. Command nexus integrity restored. Bond marker spoof rejected. I sank onto the edge of the dais, before my legs decided they hated me. My wristband cooled from brand to warmth, pulsing in a steady rhythm that matched my heartbeat instead of fighting it. The Queen released my hand slowly, as if proving to everyone watching that she could. She turned to the modified figure. "Who sent you?" The figure's eyes darted to Vale for the briefest instant. So brief I would have missed it if I hadn't spent the last day learning how predators communicate without words. Vale's pleasant smile returned, but now it looked tired. "That glance was unwise," he said softly. The Queen's gaze sharpened. "Speak." The modified figure bared their teeth. A house that believes your restraint is weakness. The queen nodded once, as if she'd already known. Then they will learn the cost of misunderstanding me. Soldiers dragged the figure away. The chamber exhaled, the star lattice loosening back into a calm tactical map. I stood, swaying slightly, then forced myself upright. "So," I said, because apparently I was incapable of having normal reactions, "am I still yours?" The queen looked at my wrist, then at her own palm, where faint lines of light still lingered like afterimages. "You are under my protection," she said, "and the part where everyone calls me property." Her eyes held mine steady, and for the first time the warmth in them didn't feel like a mistake. "They can call you what they like," she said. "They cannot touch you without touching me." I swallowed. "And if you touch me without my consent?" The queen's gaze didn't flinch from the question. "Then the bond will reject me," she said, publicly. Vale made a quiet sound. "That will make certain councils uncomfortable." "Good," the queen replied. I let out a breath that felt like it belonged to someone else. The man who'd woken up in a medical suite and assumed the universe had decided to end him in a foreign language. "I was going to demand my freedom," I said, voice rough. "I still want it, eventually." The queen nodded, "Eventually." "But I also," I admitted, surprising myself with how steady it sounded, "want to live long enough to get to eventually." Her long ears angled forward slightly, attentive. "Then we will keep you alive," she said. I managed a thin grin. "We." The queen's mouth moved again, this time a real brief smile that didn't ask permission. "Yes," she said, "we." The ship's lights softened from amber toward their earlier calm. Somewhere deep in the hull, engines shifted their tone, turning away from emergency routing and back toward forward motion. The drone hovered at my shoulder and chimed. "Congratulations. User status updated, protected ally." I stared at it. "Do I get a badge?" "You already have one," it replied. I looked down at my wristband, now pulsing calmly, not a collar, not a chain, something negotiated under fire. Outside the command Nexus window, stars slid past in silent indifference. Inside, the queen stood with her soldiers and her scheming commander and her living ship, and for the first time since waking, I felt the fear settle into something shaped like resolve. I didn't know how long eventually would take, but I knew I would not be swallowed quietly.